Some ideas are not merely thoughts, they are seeds. Seeds that, once planted in the fertile ground of human consciousness, can grow into concepts so powerful, so unsettling, they threaten to unravel the very fabric of what we believe. What if the most dangerous notions ever conceived are not born of malice, but of profound, yet terrifying, insight? The will to power, for Nietzsche, was not merely a desire for political dominance, but a fundamental driving force in all life, and striving for growth, overcoming, and the assertion of one's strength and creativity. It is the artist shaping their material, the philosopher forging new concepts, the individual striving for self-mastery. A deeply creative yet easily misunderstood impulse. So where lies the danger? Nietzsche's critique of traditional slave morality, the morality of the herd, which he saw as life-denying, and his call for a master morality, rooted in the affirmation of life and strength, could be, and terribly distorted. It provided a philosophical veneer for ideologies that championed dominance and the subjugation of the weak. The most notorious misinterpretation came with the rise of National Socialism in Germany. Nietzsche's sister, Elisabeth Förster Nietzsche, a Nazi sympathizer, selectively edited and published his unpublished notes to align with their ideology. The Übermensch was twisted into a racial ideal, and the will to power became a justification for conquest and brutality, a perversion of his original thought. This distortion fed a narrative of racial superiority and the ruthless pursuit of power, leading to unimaginable suffering. The danger here was not just in the idea itself, but in its susceptibility to manipulation by those with pre-existing destructive agendas. Nietzsche himself was critical of nationalism and antisemitism, making the Nazi appropriation a tragic irony. However, a more nuanced reading of Nietzsche reveals a call for individual self-overcoming, for intellectual courage, and for the creation of meaning in a world where God is dead, meaning where traditional sources of value have collapsed. The Übermensch in this light is not a tyrant, but an individual who fully realizes their creative potential and affirms life in all its aspects, joyous and tragic. The will to power seen through this lens is about self-mastery, the drive to overcome one's own limitations, to grow, to learn, and to express one's unique perspective. It's the philosopher's will to truth, the artist's will to create. The danger, then, is perhaps less in the idea itself, and more in the human tendency towards simplistic interpretation and the lust for external power over others. Moving from the individual's internal landscape to the realm of political power, our second dangerous idea comes from a Renaissance thinker whose name has become synonymous with cunning, amoral statecraft. His most famous work offered a starkly realistic, and for many, deeply unsettling, guide to acquiring and maintaining political authority. Niccolò Machiavelli's The Prince, written in the early 16th century, was a radical departure from the idealistic political philosophies of his time. Instead of focusing on how a ruler ought to be virtuous, Machiavelli described how rulers actually behave to succeed, often employing means that traditional morality would condemn. The core danger, attributed to Machiavellian thought, is its apparent endorsement of the idea that the ends justify the means. He argued that a prince must be willing to be cruel, deceptive, and ruthless if necessary to secure and maintain the stability and security of the state. For him, political necessity often trumped conventional ethics. Concepts like, "it is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both," sent shockwaves through a society that, at least publicly, espoused Christian virtues of humility and benevolence in leadership. Machiavelli suggested that human nature is inherently selfish and untrustworthy, and a ruler must operate from this cynical premise to avoid being overthrown. We often seek philosophy for comfort, for answers that soothe our anxieties. But what happens when philosophy offers not solace, but a chilling reflection of humanity's potential or a stark confrontation with meaninglessness? These are not ideas to be casually dismissed. Their echoes resonate through history, shaping empires and toppling them. The historical impact of Machiavellian realism is undeniable. The Prince became a manual for aspiring tyrants and a playbook for realpolitik, where national interest and power dynamics are the primary drivers of foreign policy, often devoid of moral considerations. The term Machiavellian itself became a pejorative for cunning, manipulative, and amoral behavior. Critics argued that Machiavelli's work actively encourages tyranny and the abuse of power by stripping away the moral constraints that should govern rulers. It seemed to provide a philosophical justification for acting without conscience, purely in the pursuit of political objectives, leading to widespread fear and instability if universally adopted. However, a more nuanced interpretation suggests Machiavelli was not necessarily prescribing amorality, but rather describing the harsh realities of power in the turbulent Italian Renaissance. Some scholars argue he was a patriot, writing The Prince as a desperate plea for a strong leader to unite Italy and end the constant warfare and foreign domination. Furthermore, Machiavelli separates private morality from political morality. What might be a vice in a private citizen, like deceit, could be a necessary tool for a ruler responsible for the welfare of an entire state. His work can be seen as an early form of political science, analyzing what is, rather than what ought to be, in the political arena. A brutal but perhaps necessary honesty. The enduring danger of Machiavelli, then, lies in its potential to be read superficially, to take its pragmatic advice as a license for unfettered ambition and cruelty, rather than a sober assessment of the often tragic choices leaders must make. It challenges us to consider whether morality can, or should, be absolute in the face of political chaos. Our third dangerous idea, or rather a cluster of related ideas, strikes at an even more fundamental level: the very possibility of objective truth, morality, and meaning. We venture into the unsettling terrains of extreme ethical relativism and its close cousin, nihilism. These concepts question the foundations upon which many build their lives and societies. Ethical relativism, in its extreme forms, posits that there are no universal moral standards. What is considered right or wrong is entirely dependent on individual perspectives, cultural norms, or specific situations. This directly challenges the notion of objective moral truths that apply to all people, at all times, a radically destabilizing thought for many. Nihilism, particularly existential nihilism, takes this a step further. It suggests that life has no intrinsic meaning, purpose, or value. From a nihilistic viewpoint, all values are baseless, and existence itself is ultimately pointless. This can be a profoundly disconcerting idea, stripping away the comfort of preordained purpose or divine plans. The perceived danger of these ideas is manifold. If there are no objective moral truths, what prevents individuals or societies from justifying any action, no matter how heinous? It could lead to moral chaos, where anything goes, and the powerful simply impose their will as truth. The very basis for law and social order seems to erode. For the individual, confronting nihilism can lead to despair, apathy, or an existential crisis. If nothing ultimately matters, why strive for anything? Why be good? Why even continue to exist? This bleak outlook can be psychologically crushing, undermining motivation and the will to live a meaningful life, however one might define it. This exploration is not about fear-mongering. It is about understanding the immense power of thought, the double-edged sword of radical questioning. For within these dangerous ideas lie not only perils but also, perhaps, profound truths about ourselves and the world, truths we might prefer not to face, but truths that demand our attention. Historically, while not always explicitly formulated as philosophical doctrines, echoes of relativistic or nihilistic sentiment can be seen in periods of profound social upheaval or disillusionment. When old certainties collapse, the void left behind can be filled with a sense that all is permitted, or that nothing has any real consequence, leading to anarchy or deep societal malaise. However, it's crucial to distinguish between a descriptive observation and a prescriptive endorsement. Cultural relativism, for instance, as an anthropological observation that different cultures have different moral codes, is not the same as ethical relativism asserting that all codes are equally valid. The former observes, the latter makes a profound philosophical claim about the nature of morality. Furthermore, for some philosophers, confronting nihilism is not an end point of despair, but a necessary starting point. If there is no pre-given meaning, then humanity is radically free to create its own meaning and values. This is a core tenet of existentialist thought, which often arises from an initial encounter with nihilistic premises. Thinkers like Albert Camus, for example, acknowledge the absurdity of human existence, our longing for meaning in a meaningless universe. Yet, he did not succumb to despair. Instead, he advocated for rebelling against the absurd by embracing life, by finding solidarity, and by creating meaning through our actions and choices. This is a powerful response. The danger of relativism and nihilism, then, is perhaps most acute when they are embraced passively or lead to a paralysis of will. But engaged with actively, they can become a catalyst for profound self-reflection, for a more critical examination of our inherited beliefs, and for a more authentic construction of personal and societal values. A challenge, not just a threat. These three ideas, Nietzsche's Übermensch and will to power, Machiavellian realism, and extreme ethical relativism nihilism, each, in their own way, push humanity to confront uncomfortable truths or possibilities. They challenge our notions of morality, power, and meaning at their very core, forcing us to question what we hold sacred. What connects them is their radical nature and their profound potential for both illumination and devastation. They are dangerous, not because they are inherently evil, but because they hold up a mirror to aspects of existence and human nature that are complex, often contradictory, and sometimes frightening. They expose the fragility of our constructed realities. The misinterpretation and misuse of these ideas throughout history serve as a stark warning. Powerful concepts, when simplified, decontextualized, or wielded by those with malicious intent, can become ideological weapons. This underscores the critical importance of intellectual rigor, historical awareness, and ethical consideration when engaging with challenging philosophies. It is tempting to shy away from such dangerous thoughts, to seek refuge in simpler, more comforting narratives. Yet, to do so is to risk intellectual stagnation and vulnerability. True understanding often lies in grappling with difficulty, in confronting what unsettles us, and in learning to navigate the complex landscapes of thought with wisdom and discernment. Philosophy, at its best, is not a dogma but a dynamic process of inquiry. These dangerous ideas, despite their potential pitfalls, have also spurred immense creativity, critical thinking, and new avenues of understanding. They force us to refine our own positions, to articulate our values more clearly, and to confront the limits of our knowledge. They are catalysts for growth. We will journey into the heart of three such philosophical constructs, concepts that have been accused of corrupting morals, justifying tyranny, and even stripping existence of its purpose. These are ideas that, when misunderstood or deliberately twisted, have left indelible scars on human history. Their influence is undeniable. The power of an idea lies not only in its content but in its reception. How we choose to interpret, engage with, and act upon challenging concepts ultimately determines their impact. This places a significant responsibility on each of us as thinking individuals to approach such ideas with caution, courage, and an unwavering commitment to seeking deeper understanding. So, were these ideas truly the most dangerous? Perhaps dangerous is not the final word. Transformative, challenging, radical, these also apply. Their capacity for harm often stemmed from human failing, the desire to simplify, to dominate, to escape responsibility, rather than an unshakable malevolence within the concepts themselves when properly understood. The exploration of challenging philosophies teaches us that intellectual courage is paramount. It's the courage to question our own assumptions, to face uncomfortable possibilities, and to resist the allure of easy answers. This journey into dangerous territories is, in essence, a journey towards greater intellectual and ethical maturity. Ultimately, the legacy of these ideas is not fixed. It continues to be debated, reinterpreted, and recontextualized. Their power remains, capable of inspiring new generations to think deeply about the human condition, the nature of society, and our place in the cosmos. They are part of our ongoing intellectual inheritance, for better or worse. Key takeaways from our exploration remind us that radical ideas can be easily distorted, political pragmatism can challenge conventional morality, and the absence of pre-given meaning can be both terrifying and liberating. Each demands critical engagement, not blind acceptance or outright rejection. Understanding context is absolutely crucial. The real danger, perhaps, lies not in the ideas themselves, but in an unthinking populace, unwilling to grapple with complexity. An informed and critical mind is the best defense against the misuse of powerful philosophies, and the surest guide through the often unsettling landscapes of human thought. The responsibility to think critically is ours. As we conclude this journey, the echoes of these dangerous ideas linger. They serve as a potent reminder that philosophy is not a sterile academic discipline, but a vital, living force with the power to shape destinies, to build and to dismantle, to enlighten, and if we are not careful, to deceive. These concepts force us to ask profound questions of ourselves. Where do our values truly come from? What are the ethical limits of power? And how do we construct meaning in a world that often seems indifferent to our deepest longings? The answers are rarely simple, and the questioning itself is part of the human endeavor. The challenge, then, is to engage with even the most unsettling ideas with an open yet discerning mind, to extract wisdom where it can be found, and to remain ever vigilant against their potential perversion. For in understanding these intellectual precipices, we better understand the landscape of human possibility, in all its peril and all its glory. Philosophy's dangerous edge is also its most vital. It keeps us from complacency, pushes the boundaries of understanding, and demands that we live more consciously, more critically, and perhaps more courageously. The ideas explored are not just historical artifacts, they are living questions posed to each generation. Why delve into such treacherous intellectual territory? Because to ignore these ideas is to remain ignorant of potent forces that continue to shape our world. Understanding their origins, their implications, and their potential for misuse is not just an academic exercise. It's a vital act of intellectual self-defense and critical awareness. Are you prepared to confront them? So what other ideas, lurking in the annals of thought or emerging even now, might hold a similar dangerous power? And how will we, as individuals and as a collective, choose to meet them? The library of human thought is vast, and its most challenging chapters may yet be unread or unwritten. The inquiry continues. The term dangerous idea is itself provocative. What makes an idea dangerous? Is it its inherent nature, or the context in which it is received and applied? Often, it's a combination of both. Ideas that radically challenge the status quo, question deeply held societal norms, or can be easily perverted to serve destructive ends, often earn this ominous label from those invested in maintaining order. Throughout history, philosophers who dared to push the boundaries of conventional thought were often met with censorship, ostracism, or worse. Their words were deemed corrosive, capable of unsettling the foundations upon which civilizations were built. Yet, it is often from these fringes of radical thought that profound shifts in understanding eventually emerge, for better or for worse. Our first exploration takes us into the mind of a philosopher whose work has been both celebrated as a call for human greatness and condemned as a blueprint for elitism and cruelty. His concepts, though complex and often poetic, carry a weight that has proven heavy, and at times, catastrophically misinterpreted by those who sought power. We speak, of course, of Friedrich Nietzsche, and specifically his concepts of the Übermensch, or overman, and the will to power. These are not simple doctrines but profound, multifaceted provocations. The Übermensch, often mistranslated as Superman, is presented as a goal for humanity to strive for, a being who has overcome traditional morality and created their own values.